Hi there, and welcome to the World Networking Podcast. Today, we have AquaticCactus joining us for a discussion around his life in culinary arts, how he got there through trials and tribulations of life and education, and what brings him to do streaming today, what connects him with his community, and how he tries every day to strive to be a better person. If you're joining us today, I really want to thank you for being here. We're going to have a tough discussion about suicide in this, and I just want to give a disclaimer for those who have struggled in the past with relationships or situations where this has occurred. If this is a troubling subject, you may want to skip this one, but we do discuss various ways that people work through these things in a healthy manner. And I really think that this is a good lesson to share for people to understand these troubled situations where maybe something could have happened to support that person in a better direction. And we really implore everyone joining us today, if they are struggling with this, please get some help. Reach out to us at this podcast. I'm just as much of a resource to listen and hear your mental health as anyone else who's out there that feels the same. So please enjoy today's episode, and I appreciate you being here. Hi, welcome to the World Networking Podcast. And today we have AquaticCactus joining us with a little background in streaming and a whole variety of various careers that he dabbled toes in and got to experience, and he's here to share with the viewers today kind of his broad expertise within these experiences. Cactus, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, yeah. So as Camo was saying, I'm AquaticCactus. I am currently a part-time streamer and a full-time kitchen manager. I'm pursuing a culinary career. Would like to become a chef in my personal endeavors. Streaming, obviously, I would love to do full-time streaming as well. I mean, if somewhere down the line those two things can overlap, and I can start streaming my restaurant experience, and then potentially opening my own restaurant to even like further that, to the point where I could be almost hosting my own restaurant TV show, is like the ultimate fantasy dream, you know? If I really made it one day, that would be where I see myself.
Absolutely. I think that's a really cool goal to have in mind, something where you're able to live comfortably, right?
Yeah, I think that's always the goal, right? And no one wants to be chained down by anything that they do, whether it be, you know, if you're passionate about a hobby, you don't want it to feel like, you know, you have to commit to that one thing, or if you're passionate about a career, or, you know, you're dispassionate about a career, that you don't feel like you're locked to that, and you can enjoy other things in life.
Yeah, I think that's something people forget, is we're really supposed to expand our roots when we're younger, when we're trying to develop a career. It's okay to have multiple experiences in different industries. And a lot of people view that as a negative because of how much people abuse that idea, mainly for their own mental health, in my opinion. But it's still a very, very important thing, and it happens, right? We move, we have maybe a medical thing pop up, or schooling, and you need that second job to just offset your lifestyle at the moment. But ultimately, the end goal is really like build that nest egg, right? So you can have that opportunity to step back and see what you've done, and appreciate what you've been able to experience. I think culinary is a lot like that. Like, most people I know in culinary don't just have culinary experience. It's very rare that they just have that, because it's hard to get your foot in the door to begin with, in a kitchen professionally.
Yeah, I was lucky in that way, especially because I have zero culinary schooling. I didn't do any formal culinary education. So when COVID hit, I actually got really lucky in the sense that about 6 months before then, I moved into a tourist town right at the end of summer. And a lot of restaurants had just lost all of their student workers. I needed a job. I had worked in a bakery. I had worked at McDonald's. When I was much younger, I worked in my mother's pool hall, just kind of like dropping fries and just watching the whole experience. I've always been about, watching what's going on around me. And even then, I was like, okay, this seems like it's easy. And I kick myself in the ass thinking that now we'll go deeper into that later. Um, but now that I'm in it, cooking is fun. Cooking is high intensity. It's it's stressful, but it's always a new challenge, and it's a constant way to push yourself. And like you're saying, like no one in the kitchen has just culinary experience. So the experience that you get to draw from in a kitchen, I truly feel like is kind of unique and is one of a kind in the sense that my sous chef has 14 years of culinary experience, but he was also an equipment service technician. And I can't remember what else he said he was, but he's had several different careers other than culinary. And like many people I've met along the path have been carpenters and have been accountants at one point. Something goes wrong with their job or their situation, and cooking's there. Cooking is a great interim for a lot of people, I feel like.
Yeah, and that's a important point to bring up. Like, there's a lot of moments in um, culinary situations where you don't necessarily have an environment that is catering to um, productivity, right? There's a lot of kitchens that aren't efficient, and that a kitchen is a team. It's like a sports team. You have to be cooperating for it to really
Yeah, it is.
be efficient for a long time. It's a mental drain if it's otherwise. Um, and that's just from my background, just so people have a general understanding. I've worked in the service industry, specifically food industry, for 6 years. Um, so I can relate to a lot of things Cactus has experienced in a kitchen, just not to the perspective of being a cook. I've done basic cooking, but for long periods of time, it is definitely I'd say the hardest position in the house easily.
Yeah. I can't disagree with anything you said. Cooking, as I said, is a new challenge every day, and I think one of the biggest challenges I face day to day is people. My own mental health aside, I have high functioning autism, and ADHD. I've never been a social butterfly. It's a bit outside of my realm of expertise, as we say. But I'm trying to tie this in properly. Um, the like my mental health aside, the challenges I have with people in a restaurant is also different every day. It's communication issues. It's uh, I'll, this one was kind of still weird for me to put into words. Um, Commitment issues, but in the sense of not everyone that shows up to work is going to be as passionate as I am, is going to want to work as hard as I am, is going to care as much about his teamwork as I am, and being a little bit more forgiving of people, because for them it might not be a career, it could be a transient position, and they don't have to bring 120% and passion and commitment and energy, because that's just not it's not their place at that moment. It's just a place for them to be.
I think a lot of it has to do with people's perspective on the cooking industry.
Yeah, that might be a problem too.
There's not enough respect for the position given in most scenarios.
Oh, what do you mean, bro? I am always respected to the fullest in my position. I am never disrespected by the servers who are asking me why their food is taking 20 minutes as they rang in 45 minutes worth of food. Yeah, no, I'm completely respected. The most respected, some would say.
It really is. It's really part of the reason I wanted to bring you on is there's a huge mental battle that a lot of people are having in the kitchen, and it turns into a lot of the times a substance abuse or trauma for some people. Some kitchen experiences are not beautiful. And for those who haven't ever worked behind the scenes in a kitchen, it is a very physical job, and that cannot be understated.
Yeah, you know, I don't want to get into all the deep dark behind the scenes in the kitchen, but I'll tell you, if you ask any cook, they probably have a story, or they know of a cook who has a story of a chef who's thrown pans across the line, who's like just done something completely reckless and then fucking blame the kitchen. The amount of times the kitchen gets thrown under the bus, like if your fries came out cold, I can promise you it's not, it like 99% of the time is not because the kitchen cooked cold fries. It's because it sat in the window for 8 to 10 minutes, and as the cook said, shouted that there's food dying in the window. It is very mentally taxing, as you said. It is a mental battle every day. I feel sorry for the people that do resort to substance abuse. I mean, I technically am one of them. I consume cannabis pretty regularly, and you know, caffeine from time to time, and those are my drugs. But obviously, in the kitchen industry, we're known for we're known for some worse stuff.
Yeah, it's a common trope. It would be the stereotype of the industry. I'd say the biggest one is that you can't work in the kitchen without having some hidden sins under the blanket, so to speak.
Yeah, a lot of alcoholism and other severe substance abuse that happens behind the scenes to deal with the stress, certainly.
Yeah, and it really boils down to the social aspect. Like you said, there's high demand out of the service industry as a whole. So when it comes to people who are hungry, you can never trust that they'll be kind in a hungry state of mind.
Well, yeah, right. We're a hunter-gatherer tribe, so you take it back 10,000 years, and you know, you put a bunch of ravenous hunters at the tail end of a spear. They're not going to be very polite. In fact, they're going to go out and stab themselves a boar or a deer or an elk, whatever they can find to eat over the fire that night. So, you know, 10,000 years ahead, we haven't evolved that much in reality. We just don't have the spear anymore.
That's a really good perspective. I've never really thought about, honestly. I like, it's a very good point to bring up. Like, biologically, we are working against ourselves to be civilized.
Well, truly, you know, people question, you know, psychopathy and crazy mental disorders like that. I say crazy, but in the context I'm about to apply it to, in a hunter-gatherer tribe, it makes sense to have some psychopaths because you want someone who's remorseless to be able to lead a night raid, to go and take over an opposing tribe, to burn it to the ground, to steal all the resources. You don't want that person feeling remorse. You don't want the guilt of their actions weighing on them like a normal person would. So it's beneficial to have some psychopaths. It's beneficial to have people like me who we struggle to stay up through the day or more oriented towards a night light cycle, because not everyone can stay up during the daytime to protect the tribe. Some people have to be up during the night. We have fundamental wiring, and we've evolved, certainly biologically. We've come a very long way, but certain things, they're just kind of baked in there, and they may eventually be bred out or genetically change, but for now we just have it.
Yes. And that's an important aspect to understand with others, especially when you're trying to serve, because you can't get upset at the customer. That's the general basis of being professional at work. That's the kind of thing that gets you fired, right? So,
Have you ever talked to a cook before? All we do is get upset at customers.
Well, a lot of the time it's the system, right? It kind of goes back to the system. What does your restaurant allow? What do you? How far will you go for the customer? If they want that grilled cheese sandwich, and you're working at a pasta shop, are you gonna commit to making that grilled cheese sandwich? Because you sure know you can, but should you? Like, when is the customer right? And I think that's a huge question for service industry. That's been, a tale of time, right? When do you know better? When do you, the customer, know better? It's like the Cars movie. I don't want to bring it down a weird rabbit hole with this, but when Luigi at the tire shop,
the Disney rabbit hole.
You don't know what you want. Luigi know what you want. Like, that's what I'm talking about here.
Yeah,
You've been in the trades for so long, like, you start learning a thing or two, and that's part of knowing where you want to go, where you want to spend your businesses. You're spending your business where the experience is the best.
Exactly. As a consumer, especially in times of economic hardship or recession or things like that, if you're spending money, you're only spending money where it counts. And cat's yelling at me. If you're spending that money, it's because you feel like you're getting value for your dollar. When money is freely flowing and there's economic abundance, you feel like, okay, I can live lavishly. I can tip extra for the cab driver, for the Uber when I go and get drunk at the bar. I can buy that extra watch that I maybe wouldn't have bought. I can buy a couple extra subscription services that I wouldn't normally buy. But money's good, so you feel comfortable doing that. As soon as things are tight, all of a sudden value comes back into perspective, because that watch really holds no value. You take it to the pawn shop, he's going to offer you $100. You paid $800. That seems fair, right? In times of economic hardship, value really comes into it. And I feel like the service industry, our margins are always so tight that value has to be one of the number one priorities. And that's why I feel like the customer is always right mentality has prevailed for so long.
Yeah, that's a solid point. And that is a big aspect, is self-value, really. Like how much is the experience upsold, like upscaled? Because, like, what separates McDonald's from fine dining? It really has to do with the overall atmosphere, the overall production process, and quality of the product itself, like the ingredients and what comes out of it. Like, yes. And I think another thing, like, to equate it to is something I know is music. It's like musicians, another one of those roles that's kind of looked down upon as a major career, because of how much fluff is pumped out, and to what degree the music being played is like there could be the McDonald's quality of music, right? That's what a lot of people feel like pop is, in a sense, where it's basic rhythms.
But yeah, well, I feel like there really is only kind of, when most people think about music, and I don't have this perspective, I just feel like, this is maybe the general perspective. When most people think about music, they think there's either the McDonald's quality or there's the fine dining.
Yes.
And I feel as though a lot of people don't have that middle ground. The middle ground is almost just white noise in music. You tune it out.
Yes. And a lot
You
of people
grab
that
it.
appreciate music, like that appreciate that white noise kind of music, it's because they don't necessarily pay attention to the fine dining.
Well, or they've had the fine dining, they like it, they know it's there, but they want to keep it as a special experience. You
Yeah.
visit it once every couple of months. It's not your weekend hangout spot. Same thing for my family. They just kind of wanted to change the scenery, so it worked out well for everybody. We jumped across the country and started working at a gas station because I was in, what do you want to call that, a correspondence for high school, online courses. Because I couldn't get enrolled in a physical school. I was like 1.5 kilometers away from the school that I was trying to enroll in, and they're like, "You're not in our district." Like, what the fuck? like, what is your district?
Yeah.
I was like, this is super weird. And then they're like, well, he needs like this ID and this. And I'm like, I literally just moved to Alberta. Like, I need to go to school. So it's just a huge hassle. I went for like 3 months and just felt like I got absolutely nothing out of it. So I just did correspondence for my last year and did even less, just because of how I was emotionally. But I really just focused on work and trying to be social at the gas station because I was not in a social mind frame. Just trying to expand my mental hemisphere, or not
Like
atmosphere.
capabilities.
It truly, because again, I anything that I had gained pretty much up to that point, I lost a very close friend of mine.
Yes. And if it's something they didn't expect, not necessarily because of the staffing or the restaurant itself, but just the meal. Maybe they stepped out of their comfort zone, and that was a big move for them. I know a lot of people that don't switch their meals. They order the same thing, and then they stick to it. And when they eventually step out, that's a big moment. That's them trying to grow their comfort zone, and it could be a therapeutic thing. Food's very emotional for a lot of people, so you don't want to mess that emotional connection up. If they give you that trust to experience something new, but the last thing you want to do is give them a bad experience.
Yeah, absolutely. You you never want to deliver a bad experience. I feel like as a cook, you hear the jokes. Oh, I order 10 minutes to cook or 10 minutes to close. The cook's gonna spit in my food. Yeah, very few cooks are actually gonna spit in your food. You have to be a pretty shitty person to have that little respect. I haven't met anyone in the industry who would ever do that because we all care enough to deliver a quality meal. Like, yeah, it sucks. We want to close. We want to go home. But at the end of the day, all I really want to hear is my front of house staff come back and say, "Hey, my table said that everything was fantastic. They loved this. They said that this was the best thing they've ever had." Like, hearing those compliments, the stress of the day falls away because that one person at the very least had a great experience and probably had a smile on their face because of your hard work. And there's a lot of pride that can be taken in that.
Yeah, I have pride when I am able to help that person out. Like as a customer, I feel like, and this is the partly the empathic nature I have, to want to connect on a personal level with people, but it's like today I went to a food truck that's the Mighty Greek in Redmond, Oregon, and they are phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal cooks, and their family comes from Greece. The mother actually had her grandfather her father come from Greece, and they've passed down these generations of cooking techniques to bring to a new set of eyes, a whole new culture that hasn't necessarily experienced their version, their way of cooking this traditional dish. And I went up to the woman running the food truck and I told her, this is absolutely fantastic. Like you gave me something to really be proud that I chose your establishment to come spend my time and my energy at. And like there is a sense of pride for the customer too when they're able to share, like, hey, look at what our community has. Like look at who wants to stay around. Like and it's a sense of pride when the service industry wants to help the community. And there's a lot of cases where community members chase business out. They don't want them in their town. So it's there's always a yin yang to this. There's always a balance of am I doing the right thing here, or am I not doing enough of the right thing?
Yeah, you mentioned yin yang, and the word I was thinking about in my head was symbiosis. There's a symbiosis between community and establishment, and you truly need to keep that restaurant, or that not the restaurant. You truly need to keep that relationship at a healthy balance where it's not just the customer taking too much from the establishment to the point where the establishment feels like they can't really operate within the bounds that they originally wanted to.
Yes.
But then there's also the extent of, the restaurant operating in a way where they still have creative freedom. You have your regular clientele who likes your product, but you swap out 2 or 3 dishes that are low movers and try something new. And you can bring in a new audience, but still try and appeal to your core audience. Just maintain that symbiosis without throwing it all out the window, trying to change everything or challenge something.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with everything you said. Like, and then some. I would say, like, the one other thing I'd add to that is the flexibility to have creativity is part of what makes a good restaurant stick out, in my opinion. Taking those risks and constantly adapting to be the best quality experience that you see possible in the moment it really is what gives a good restaurant the edge. It's not always necessarily the staff. That does come down to management. And that's a whole nother level of the symbiotic relationship, right? There's people who are not necessarily connected to the kitchen, and they have to have that trust with their kitchen. And you have to have the trust that they'll give you that trust to perform the duties asked. And that's a huge part of cooking that makes it stressful, just right there.
Yeah, man. And just when you're talking about it there, it sounds just like you're maintaining a relationship with like an intimate partner.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it feels sometimes. You've got your fights, you've got your ups, your downs, your highs, your lows. You celebrate your successes, you wallow together in your failures. But then you all work together to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and it's an interesting environment. I will say, if you work in an establishment that has a strong sense of camaraderie or is trying to build a strong sense of camaraderie, it's easy to feel like what you're doing has an impact, and it's easy to adjust it because you're all on the same page, right?
Yeah, it's flexible because the nature of the mentality is flexible.
Absolutely. But I mean, like, certain workplaces I've been in, you get what I'm going to call old timer syndrome. Let's see. So this is where I'm going to blame my mental health a little bit, and we'll go a little bit into my family. I have 2. So my mom and dad were never married. They had my brother and I were 3-ish years apart, 2 years, 10 months. They were never really together, but they broke up when I was 2. From there, they both went on to find new partners. Neither one of them very successful, but they both had children. So on my dad's side, I have my younger sister and my older stepbrother, who I consider to be like a brother, even though we don't really talk much. There's been a disconnect over the last couple of years. We just haven't had much to talk about, or we've both just been too busy with work. So, and I'm going to circle back to your question here. Just, it does require a little bit of backstory. So I was the middle child on my dad's side and my mom's side. I also have a younger sister on my mom's side. And the guy that my mom got with to have that child, my younger sister, he is an insane egomaniac. He's wildly self-absorbed. He is wildly narrow-minded. He's educated, but textbook educated. And like, smart like an ox. But he was weird with money and like always needed to manage the money, even though he made a ridiculous amount of it. But it's usually because he spent it faster than he could make it. And then my dad had a nasty cocaine problem for many a year, so he accrued $40,000 in debt. Before he finally got a great settlement package from his work, he took the settlement package, paid off his debt, and then blew through the money in a couple of years. Long story short, I basically got shafted for any sort of extracurricular I ever wanted to do. So gaming was my passion. And my grandma had a keyboard at her place. When I was very young, I taught myself to play with the music books that she had around, that she had taught herself to play with. And so I got quite passionate about piano. I really enjoyed that, but never could afford a piano for my house or anything like that. Couldn't really afford music lessons. So I could only go to open mics or like community centers if they had a keyboard or piano or things like that. So my ability to explore extracurricular activities was very limited from a young age. And because of that, I dove headlong into gaming, headlong into music, into passions that were cheap or free. They're one-time commitment purchases. You buy a console, you buy one game, that's what you have. Until your next birthday where someone can spare $40, $50, you get another game. Maybe you get 2 because your aunt and your grandma had one. My brother, on the other hand, he got to do a lot of like all the sports that he wanted and all the activities that he wanted to do. Just because he was older and got first dibs. That being said, I liked a lot of things for a short period of time. And this is why I mentioned my mental health at the beginning, is because my ADHD allowed me to hyper focus on anything that really popped up in front of me. But there's only a handful of things that stuck with me. Like I still game to this day. After I got hit by the car, I had to stop playing piano. The doctor gave me an ultimatum. He said, if you continue playing piano and playing video games, you're going to develop severe arthritis at a very young age. He said, if you only do one of them, you're still going to develop arthritis, but it won't be until later in your life. I was like, okay, it's a pretty straightforward ultimatum. Only choose one. Video games was the more accessible hobby. And it was a great outlet for my ADHD, for me controlling the level of stimulus I was receiving. As a young kid, reading was an unbelievable part of my life. I read almost every book in my school's library, if it had even the slightest interest to me. So, the voracious reader. I loved learning about the English language and the intricacies of the English language, which definitely, I think, makes me a nerd by definition.
That's fair.
So I'll just wrap up my tangent here. So, like, because the hobbies that I potentially wanted to pursue weren't an option or weren't facilitated as an option,
You adapt.
I was gonna say hyper focused, but yeah, I adapted. So I just got really, really good at anything I wanted to commit to. So when I was young, I wanted to compete with my brother in different sports and or like different physical accomplishments. And pretty much anything I set my mind to, I could beat him at, just because I hated his cocky attitude. But it also translated to a lot of other things where I wouldn't stop challenging myself until I felt like I was at a level of success where I was happy with. But knowing now that I'm a perfectionist, that doesn't exist. I don't know if there is a level that I'm happy with in most things.
So you're not sure exactly where your finish line is, so to speak.
Yeah, well, like you set a goal, and most people will set small goals, and aim for small goals. They're achievable. It'll make you feel better about setting your goals or achieving your goals, and then you'll want to set more goals so you can achieve more goals. I missed that page entirely. It must have not been in any of the books in my school library, but maybe in other schools. I decided the best way for me to do something was full dive in, even if I have no fucking clue what I'm doing, even if I don't even understand the basics. Just throw myself in, no life jacket, and if I drown, I drown. But I set monumental goals. I never think, okay, if I just take this next step, I'll be one step closer to getting through the forest that I'm lost in. Instead, it's, okay, if I take the next step and then I might be able to see the forest, or if the sun is up at a certain angle and I can see it through a clearing in the trees, I could calculate the distance. Well, what if the sun's not there? Or what if I get attacked by a deer and I can't focus by attacked by a deer? That's a bad example. But I get attacked by a bear. And
No.
I can't see where the sun is. I overthink it.
It was a very Canadian explanation. I just have to say that.
The deer comes out of nowhere and he's fucking running up on you while you're trying to tap the tree for your syrup. But that's the thing. I'm never thinking about that next step. I'm thinking about 12 other things, and I'm always overcomplicating it. So I have an end goal in mind, but then the goalpost shifts. It might end up as a totally different goal, or I achieve the goal. I achieve a monumental goal, and I just don't feel satisfied. I feel like, okay, I did it, but what did that do for me? And then I start overthinking again, and then I wind up in a vicious cycle of, okay, I achieved my goal, or I didn't achieve my goal because I set an unrealistic goal. But I can't just be happy with my progress. I haven't figured out how to just be okay with not being 120% committed, knowledgeable, experienced, skillful.
I didn't have a lot of control over my circumstances in life. And I had things, but I didn't have connections, and to the degree that other people had with their family. So that was like, it almost kind of became my family, in some weird overthinking way.
So
Being able to control my environment that I was happy around, and I could constantly expand the narrative to be something that I could enjoy. That brought me joy.
absolutely, that's understandable. It's understandable, and struggling with autism, I can understand how having a sense of control over your environment truly can be, a light in the darkness at times. Grew up in households where my parents would often yell at each other, step parents and whatnot. I'll just use that term kind of interchangeably. My parents would often fight and scream at each other, and it, it it's certainly a light in the darkness. And I would say the same thing about music. And I'll tie this one in with my ADHD. It allows me to control how much of what I'm getting. If I want a lot of stimulation, you've got metal music, you've got electronic music, you've got party music, you've got dance music. If you want something a little bit more chill, you've got love songs, you've got R&B, you've got alternative, you got soul.
Blues is one of my favorites. Like for that
yeah, it's just blues and like bluesgrass and bluegrass. And you've got all those really hit you where it hurts or hit you in the feels type of music. Music has that dichotomy, that range, that no matter what you feel like, no matter what your environment is, music can change it. I feel like if you connect with music that way.
Yeah, and like going back to both of these, like it really comes down to what keeps you stimulated, and as a young person, you're naturally wired to be stimulated. You need that stimulation, you need that interaction, that creativity, that spark that brings
we're naturally curious.
Yeah.
We want to discover something, and we want something to pique our interest to the point where we want to keep discovering about it, and we want to challenge it, or we want to push it to the limits.
Exactly. And I think like, because I'm staring at a list that you gave me of a kind of general background of some things that you've dove into, and it's all over the board. I mean, like, it's truly all over the board.
I told you, man. I told you, I've had some pretty crazy backgrounds. Like, there should be even some things in there that's not on there. Like, I kind of forgot to mention. It's just weird that I forgot to mention this.
Let's back up before you get into that.
Okay.
Let's start from the beginning here, because I think this is you have a very interesting story for a lot of young people to hear, that could help them through some of these struggles. Both you and I share. I mean, we both have had fractured family situations to an extent where it did affect the way we chose to develop our mental fortitude to life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more there. Knowing what I know about your situation, I can completely understand where you're coming from. Obviously, you know what I'm talking about, like having your family just yelling in the next room over, and just how just really debilitating that can be over time. Truly,
it's exhaustive. It's literally a stimulant. It's like music. You can kind of turn it off sometimes, and sometimes it agitates you. You hear that kind of music you don't want to hear, and life's full of all sorts of noises in the background that you do at an extent have to learn your way of coping with other people's choices in a situation, and that's a very hard thing for an overthinker.
I think that's just you just touched on the secret of life right there. The trick is realizing that we're all different human beings, what I like is not going to resonate with every person, but put it out there. Find who it does resonate with, and grow what you want to prosper. And if you don't put it out there, it has no potential for growth.
Yeah. Well said.
But yeah, let's on
Let's dive into
that hermit note, let's double back and we'll go back to whatever point you want to touch base on here.
Well, I would love to see, first off, I guess before we even dive into this, did you have any travel experience as a younger man? Like, did you go anywhere that inspired you, that you saw something that maybe changed your life in an aspect?
Oh, okay. Just give me a moment of silence here to mull that over.
Of course.
And I already feel my answer forming, and it's gonna sound a little bit weird. I feel like, but I'm gonna deliver it, and you're just gonna have to accept it.
Heard.
Okay, so here's what I've settled on. Obviously, I stated earlier, my family was pretty poor. Well, my families were not poor. My families were poor at managing their financial situations. So let's put it that way.
That makes total sense. Common problem. Common problem.
They weren't poor. They're just poor in the economical sense department. That being said, my travel was done through the medium of media, of reading, of video games, of movies, of books. Well, I said reading. It was through music. Those were my transportative methods, and my imagination has always been my best friend. Other than that, I've pretty much seen everywhere in Canada. I've lived everywhere in Canada except for Quebec, Newfoundland and Labrador, and the Northwest Territories.
That was a lot of Canadian noises coming out of the mouth.
Yeah. Up here in Canada, I never lived in Quebec. I never lived in New Brunswick. Never lived in the Northwest Territories.
It just always throws me for a loop. Because Canada is one of those places, man. In America, people don't talk about Canada. It's
no,
just
we're the awkward cousin.
You are the awkward cousin. They'll talk about Mexico all day, but Canada.
Oh, yeah, this is your best friend. You fucking no problem. You can bring up Mexico in a heartbeat in a conversation. Someone talks about Canada, and you're just like, all of a sudden the tension builds.
I can't help myself, and with Aquatic, we're comfortable with each other, man. So he knows what I mean. It is a big thing, that we discuss. It's the cultural differences between our countries. It's the whole reason this podcast exists, man, to expose people to these differences. And I don't mean to cut your thought off. Please continue. I couldn't help myself.
Oh, I was in the middle of a thought. Oh, fuck, it's gone now. I don't know. It probably was just something like an offshoot thought anyways.
Well, you were just saying that you were excluding those places you were traveling all around Canada, and that was like your extent of physical travel.
Well, yeah, because of my broken up family situation, I moved around Ontario a lot just because of different jobs. My dad always lived in one very small town, so I grew up in like a small town environment. I got to see, cultural trends play out in like mini microorganism type social ecosystems. It was really interesting, especially then moving to larger cities, being around places like Toronto where there's like 7 million people in the surrounding area. It's one of the largest city in Canada. It's significantly different from that small town mentality. And even then you understand, like, there's a cultural difference from people who live 3 hours away. And I got to see a very wide variety of that moving around with my mom to different places. Like, just if I were to list off a handful of places in Ontario I moved, I lived in Alliston, Barrie, Beaton, Newmarket, Orangeville, Baxter, Tottenham. Didn't live in Hamilton, lived in Oshawa. And there's probably a couple more, but you know, lived in a lot of different places, even just in Ontario. Moved to pretty much every other different province, even if it was just for a month. And you know, there's no two communities across this country that are the same. So even though I haven't traveled around the world, the travel I've done within Canada has really shown me a very broad perspective of the human experience, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think that's a very valid thing to say.
And then, of course, my nerdy response of traveling through books and all that, and imagination. But truly, you know, my Twitch bio says it best, or I think it might have been my old bio. But you know, in real life, you know, there's bills to pay. There's a mortgage looming over your head. You know, in our family situation, there's something that you're responsible about. They're biting you in the ass. There's, you know, a sick kid. There's always a stress. But you know, you jump into a video game and you know that stress is 10 minutes long and it's going to lead to a dopamine hit, because video games are designed that way, where it's a totally different environment. It takes you out of your stress, your situation, and gives you another small problem. And it's a great thing to focus on, because you can solve that small problem. You know, find the hidden treasure chest 1,000 meters away in a forest. Okay, great. Easy task. Your brain does it. You know, you're stressed out for 10 minutes because there's monsters and maybe you're not a high enough level to go and be in that area, but you really want the chest reward loot. And they give you that dopamine hit. You get the chest reward loot. You didn't die. Maybe you died once, but you can easily just go back and try it again. It takes you out of the moment. Reading the same thing, it takes you out of the moment. You read about a character's struggles and you start to think, oh, you know, how would I solve that problem? How would I react in the situation of this person? And not only do you get a sense of empathy and compassion, but you also stop thinking about, you know, your own stress, your own world that might be crashing down around you, but you have that modicum of escape.
Yes, precisely. And that is something like Matthew Kitchens, the last person I had on the podcast, and I were talking about with kids and mental development. That's important, is that sense of falling on your face a little bit, you know, getting that scratch on the knee, falling off the bike, losing the board game. Like, those things are small in nature, but they're approachable. They're able to be broken down into little facets of knowledge that you learned your personality from, and
they're foundational, right?
Into. Exactly. The building blocks of what develop you into someone stronger, that can handle a joke, that can handle a problem, and ultimately that is what childhood development leads to. Like, you grow up, and it doesn't have to be this daunting thing of disconnecting yourself from others. A lot of people view that as like, oh, well, I'm going to college, this is my end all for my friendships. It doesn't have to be. You have to open your mind up. I mean, you don't have to, but it's really beneficial to open your mind up to the idea of, hey, I'm not the only one out here feeling like this. I can definitely find other people that can relate to the things I've experienced in some form.
Like, you're definitely not the only lonely person at college. You're definitely not like the only person you know who likes anime at your workplace. You're not the only gamer, in your group of curlers that you go to do once a month. Like there are connections out there if you want them.
Yes, seizing the day, as Stoicism through Marcus Aurelius is always presented. Like
Oh, Marcus.
I love that aspect of Stoicism. It's important to seize the day, to get up out of bed, to have this drive to acknowledge defeat, acknowledge success as one whole dynamic of life that is going to very well be relevant throughout your whole life. And connecting the two, connecting the stages of life between childhood and adulthood is part of the individual's journey in life. That's what maturity is. I mean, it's straight up just what maturity is. We learn to mature our subjects in the sense and in the hope that the process of maturity leads to success.
Yeah, I think it was Sun Tzu who said it may not. Don't quote me on this. The internet investigators may get on me about this. It may not have been Sun Tzu. Whoever said it, there's 1,000 lessons to be learned from defeat, but there is only one lesson to be learned from success. And I truly believe that mentality alone is enough to get you through a lot of things. It's enough to understand that success is the product of many failures. Success is the product of many trials and tribulations. And when you feel like you're successful, it's because you have overcome your own trials and tribulations. You have overcome what you thought was insurmountable at a time, but you've grown to be able to take in stride.
Yes. And that's part of the aspect of it is pace. Pace is a huge thing for people because there is no right pace. There's no correct pace to establish each day by. Where you're gonna have days where you sleep terribly. You just don't want to get out of bed. You just don't want to get out of bed physically. And you know what? Like, it is hard to make that decision to seize the day when you'd rather seize the night. You'd rather seize that sleep. And sometimes maybe seizing the day is seizing the sleep. And that's part of the battle is understanding the trust level you have with yourself. Yeah, exactly.
And knowing your limits. Like, sometimes, and that's why failure is important, especially personal failure, because you have to push yourself. And I'm going to say this as a perfectionist. As someone who constantly pushes myself, you have to push yourself. You don't have to do it to the level I do it. It's unhealthy. Professionals would say it's unhealthy. Have said it's unhealthy. It's good to a degree. It's the athlete mentality of, I'm good at this, but I'm not perfect, and I'll never be perfect, but I can be 1% better than I was yesterday. I can be 0.1% better than I was yesterday. And as long as I can be some percentage better than I was the day before, or I can use the knowledge that I've acquired in the day before, or the days before, or the weeks before, so on and so forth, then every failure that you had up to that point is a success, because you learned from it, you grew from it, and you were able to turn it into something that you were proud of, and that is a success in my mind.
Absolutely, it makes the experience tangible. to break down, and there's a lot of truth to pushing yourself being the main culprit to growth. You really do have to push outside of what you know in that moment to experience true growth.
And where I meant to go with it is outside of your comfort zone, right? Because you have to push yourself to your physical limits and then sometimes beyond to understand, okay, that's where I draw the line. You know, I'll use a personal example. Beginning of the summer, we were incredibly short staffed at the restaurant. You'll be familiar with this, Camo. I was working 12 to 16 hour days some days, working 6 days a week. In doing so, I reached my limit. I really, really did reach my limit of how much I could take and how much I was taking on. And there came a time where I just had to say, like, you know what, guys, I understand we're struggling, but we've been struggling. And I've been struggling a lot to try and make it so we're all struggling equally so someone else can shoulder a little bit more. And it was important to reach that spot with myself to say, all right, I can push myself, I can be a workhorse, but here's the line in the sand. And if I go past this line, here are the negative repercussions. And, you know, maybe as I grow as a person, as I age, I'll be able to overlook those negative repercussions. I'll be able to grow or outgrow them. But for now, you know, I just, you know, make a mental note. All right, if I go past that line, this is what'll happen.
Yes, it's important to voice those concerns because it is part of adulthood. Really, like you've reached a point in your life. You're no longer a kid. I'm no longer a kid. Like, we had to change our attitudes when it came down to how much you take on, because you have your own responsibilities at that point. You're not dependent. You're not reliant on someone else balancing your stability in the background, your home life stability, if there is any. And it is a whole nother dynamic of learning to be honest with your teams in any work situation. And how much honesty do you really want to present them with? How much can they handle from their experiences, their mental fortitude? Because, yeah, I mean, it could be the simplest thing that triggers a harsh response from someone. Even if you would think like, oh, this is something that I've dealt with. This is something I've acknowledged in my life. It doesn't bother me as much. So, you know, I might be honest, like say, like, you know, maybe you're frustrated that you bite your nails, and you keep biting your nails when you're stressed at work, and so you talk about that, but someone's like, "Oh, that's my go-to. Like, how could I not bite my nails?" You know, it's that mentality of, okay, well, they're at a different part of their life. Maybe there's a real reason that they didn't want to get to that point of changing, and opening their perspective up through actions, like through your personal growth, I think is the best and most effective approach to actually gaining true connection with an individual. At least a development level, because you're not their parent. You're their coworker, and we're speaking from a coworker sense, because there's a lot of dynamics when you're adult, of course. What kind of atmosphere you bring yourself around, or apply yourself to. But with that, and the reason I mention it is because there's tons of little things that trigger people into more detailed scenarios. Like, you're essentially sharing all the time when you're at work, whether you like it or not. You're always presenting yourself through action. So you might as well try to spin it in a positive light if you're going to always be around that atmosphere
because that's a long-term goal, right? You don't want to be negative. You know, nothing negative typically stays around if the environment of business is successful. If everyone was negative, nothing would get done effectively. So that's why I bring that up. It really comes down to this whole journey of how comfortable am I with facing the fact that I need to grind right now? How comfortable am I with the fact that I need to focus? That I need to stop. I need to stop acknowledging everything that's gone on in my life, and I need to collect my thoughts and rally them into a way that produces a good product. And that
use
is
to
the
push
core
forward.
response. Yes, it's the fuel to the fire.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, other than spite and malice being the fuel to my fire, which is pretty much 90% of what I'm based on. Having older brothers and such, they're always making fun of you. They're always picking on you. Oh, I can do this better. Oh, I'm smarter. I'm like, yeah, you're fucking 3 years older. You've had 3 years more of school. Of course you're smarter, dickhead.
Yeah, it is a coarse nature in you because
they weren't laughing
when
they weren't laughing very much when I was smarter and I was rubbing it in their face. I'm like, oh, we don't have to be a dick about it. And it's like, oh, well, then what was your excuse? But the excuse is, we're kids. We want to have that sense of superiority. You want to have that. You want to have something to hold over them, to feel like you're special, to feel like you're unique, because you don't want to feel like you're just like everyone else in a world of 8 billion people. There's something really, really unsettling about that, I would say, because I've got my oddities, I've got my quirks, I've got my eccentricities, if you will. But I'm going to give a weird like brain exercise here. Say you've got a Plinko board. You know what Plinko is?
Yes.
You drop all the balls and all those different pegs.
Yeah, a huge thing in Asia.
Okay, so you got like a massive Plinko board, right? And at the bottom of it, you have like skills and character distributions, character traits. Every human gets like 100 marbles, right? You drop them, and you'll get some commonalities, and you'll get some similarities. But I'll guarantee you, very few, if any, will fall exactly the same. Especially if you put each person's pegs in slightly different spots. So you randomize the pegs, and that's life. We're not all born into the same circumstance. And when you do that, you get commonality, but you also get immense difference. And immense difference of circumstance, or not of circumstance, of immense difference of outlook, even though you may have the same circumstance, is the result. You get very different people from very similar experiences because, their marbles fell a little bit differently. They have a few gaps in there. Some got jammed up in the pegs up top and didn't fall down into the respective categories. All these weird things in life happened to create that unique human. And because of that, each one of us, we can't diminish someone else's hardships to say, oh, hey, I got past that. You should be able to. It's like you got past it because of your skill distribution in your way, your Plinko board. It allowed you to be more resilient in that situation. Whereas in a different crisis situation, that person that you've made fun of or belittled for not being able to respond well in whatever the other situation was, is now they're the expert. They are the go-to, and you're the one who is in a debilitated state and needs their help. And so you have to be patient with people and understand that just because your Plinko board allowed you to get over it doesn't mean the person next to you's Plinko board isn't going to be entirely different.
Yes. No, that is a wonderful analogy I have to give you for that because it in my mind goes to like the other side of it is like the planning stage. You can sit there and plan all you want. You can expect whatever you want out of the dropping of the marbles. But until you actually drop the marbles, you're never going to know what
How
you're
they'll
going to
land.
result with. Exactly.
You can hope for a certain distribution. And you know, if you've ever played Plinko on like a little slots game or on your phone or anything like that, you'll choose. You'll be like, oh, you know, this prize on the right is really tempting. If I just drop the ball, or if I just track this ball's path, then I'll know the path for the next one. And you think to yourself, you try and justify these causalities, but really all you're doing is looking for a reason for randomness. And as you said, you know, you can plan, but when things come down to it, it doesn't matter, or it matters a negligible amount. You know, plan for the worst, but hope for the best has always been my mentality.
Well, it doesn't affect the true nature of the game. It like, as much as you think the game is still the same, it's still a game of random chance and random effect. There's always going to be this external element that influences what that means to you.
Exactly. I made the joke about a Nagato quote earlier to you from Naruto, but that quote actually really resonates with me. That in order to know someone's pain, you must go through what they have endured. You must endure their same circumstance and walk the same path. But even then, you may never know their true self. And that quote really resonates with me because when I was quite young, I had a conversation with my estranged mother. And we were talking about perspective. And two people have a conversation, right? We have a conversation about, I don't know, black holes. And we're having an in-depth conversation. And for me, the conversation was about how black holes can be a source of perpetual energy if we made massive technological improvements in certain sectors. And that was my focus and my understanding and my passion. That was my reason that my one thing that I held on to as I walked away from that conversation. That if I was going to go have another conversation with someone, that I would share with them. Like, oh, I was just talking with so-and-so, and we had a conversation about this. And then, I say my version of the events. That person would then go, or, the person I had the initial conversation with, we'll call them person A. Person A goes and has their own conversation with person D, and they have a totally different take. They thought it was about how horrific the idea of a black hole being at the center of every universe is, and how eventually we're all going to be consumed into the black hole's eye. And it's like, they go and share that with person D. Now, person D has that in their head, and they're thinking about what person A said, not what person B said, which would be me in this conversation. So you have two people who had the exact same conversation, the exact same experience. It was a shared experience. And yet, if you involve anyone else, you have two entirely different experiences.
Yes, and that's a huge dynamic shift for some people to understand because they didn't expose themselves out of their comfort zone at a young age like some people might. And that's something I always wondered in college. I actually started really realizing, like, man, I've been here before. Like, I didn't go to college, super young, but when I did get to college, it's like I've been already thinking about this stuff. I just didn't know that. And how could I have known it? I never put myself out of my comfort zone to come ask. I never cared to ask because the conversation never arose. And that's part of it is there's this dynamic of the unknown. that you have to accept you can do anything you want. The free will that you have, you could murder someone, you could steal something, you could try to run for president. There's different options that are dramatic in
For to
scale.
walk for president, I'm not really into fitness.
But it's truly a thing of fascination of how much there is to learn just by a simple perspective shift.
Truly. And despite me not really being the most social person, through Twitch streaming, I truly think that I've gained a respect for the social component, because one person talking about an idea in a room is crazy. Two people talking about an idea in a room is sharing ideas. And it also leaves room for challenging an idea. Because sure, you can challenge yourself. You can this is difficult to explain. If you're a really good thinker, you can divide different aspects of your own mentality into their own personalities, essentially. And you can pit your own mentality against itself. And I truly think that's what makes a strong thinker. A very good thinker is someone who can challenge their own mentality without external live opinion. And then that is to say there's no other interaction other than, maybe I've received a bit of text. I read through this text. I analyze it. My logical brain says, okay, this is what I think. My emotional brain says, okay, that's actually wrong. This is what I think. And then, those two parts have a war with each other. And then a part of me says, oh, but what if we bring greed into this element? What if we bring hatred into this element? What if we bring fundamental bigotry into this element, into this equation? And you start to challenge different ideas and different concepts, and you almost run it through this barrage of tests. And this is a weird thing to explain, but this is what my brain does for everything. It's super fun being an overthinker.
I'm with you there.
And so you run a million mental simulations about everything, and you end up with different results. But if you can pit all of the results against each other and then do a statistical analysis, okay, which one of these has the greatest cost risk outcome? Which one is the safest investment of my time, my health, my wellness, my resources, whatever it may be, to get the most out of it, because that's always the goal. But a lot of people do it with just surface value data. They don't do that, the warring parts. But that's where a social circle comes in. You don't have to have a warring parts necessarily if you have a strong social circle. They can be your warring parts. And that's why, people are like, well, you're best friends. What do you mean? You fight all the time. Yeah, they fight all the time because they're constantly challenging each other's ideas.
Yes.
It's not fighting, it's expressing their passion. And because they're both pushing each other's passion, they're expanding and they're growing together.
And I think it's another dynamic of perspective I've learned over the years. And it's my opinion, of course. As anything is that comes from my mouth, it really is the way I view life. I've interpreted it is you can be the person that views like the arts and expression as a necessary evil, just a necessity to gain balance in life. But in my opinion, philosophy, debate, and reasoning, self-reasoning, is they're all forms of art. They're all forms of expression, and at the true core of the nature, they're tools for innovation, and it's something that I believe originally was drafted for the purpose of bettering each other, bettering the situation of reason within everyone's heart. And so they can better found groups of understanding individuals that drive towards a common purpose. And that's really what society's built on, right? Are these acknowledgments of philosophy, of ideals, natural law, reasoning, debate. These things are all common to the individual. But the thing that's not common about it is the background, the Plinko board. You know, it is simply how much experience and education have you endured to the
Yeah,
point
yeah, yeah. I mean, if we
of
add to the Plinko board mentality, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
no, it's okay. That was it.
If we add to the Plinko board mentality a little bit here, we can do it like, RPG application. You get an RPG skill tree. As you level up in life, you've gone through public school, high school, post-secondary. You've gotten some real world experience and interactions. Yeah, you get different specs. You get more Plinko balls, and you drop those down, and that's your different distribution. Maybe you get to choose where those ones go, but it's still built on your already established Plinko board. So then, as you were saying, that Plinko board being the variance, your level of education, your level of experience, your level of knowledge, those are all the things that your level of application, these are all the things that are making the human being and allowing each human being to do each thing respective to themselves rather than respect.
With the active life of the outdoors coming up, people are looking to be out and about more. Sasquatch Farms CBD brings organically grown products in the Sierra Nevadas from the soil to the people. Farmer John has worked on green projects on the farm since 2013. He looks forward to providing you with the highest quality soaps, salves, CBD tinctures, pre-rolls, along with some other fresh products. It takes a community in farming to survive, so any efforts made to support our farmers in the world helps to support our society as a whole. So remember, if you can't catch them out on the farmers market, catch them online at SasquatchFarmsCBD.com. That's SasquatchFarmsCBD.com. Thank you. Now back to the show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in my mind, I visualize that effect being it removes pins from the board. It just opens the floodgates to more straight paths into a positive interaction at the end of the day.
Yeah, it allows a connection. It allows two, say, and we're wildly abusing this metaphor now. But if you consider the Plinko balls to be thoughts and you start removing the pins, you're allowing, thoughts to start to interact, to start to commingle. They're starting to collide with each other. And they're creating a force and a response because they've come into contact with each other. My experience with my parents, has now jaded certain experiences in my life moving forward. So I get the negative experience of those two things coming in contact of those two Plinko balls. But I also get the positive experience of, if I hadn't moved across the country at the time that I did, I probably wouldn't have met my significant other, who I've now been with for, almost 6 years. Um,
Congratulations.
so yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Actually, that just took me by surprise for a second there. Congratulations to me too. Yeah. um, and they said I'd never have a committed relationship.
Love hard.
Um,
Like,
but that's exactly it. So like, you know, these moments in life, these interactions, positive or negative, when they come into contact with each other, they create ripple effects. They change the distribution a little bit of the Plinko board, or they have the potential to. And that I think is a very interesting idea and an interesting concept.
and if I may, like, and again, I'm gonna abuse this analogy one final time here.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Just beat it to death.
It's working, man. This analogy is a genius analogy, honestly, in my opinion. But it's like it goes back to the philosophy I know and love, Stoicism. And Marcus Aurelius said it best: the obstacle is the way. Truly, the obstacle is the way. And that analogy of pulling the pins, that makes sense with the philosophy. You are creating a gateway out of the failures and the struggles and the successes. All of it correlates to understanding that that's not really an obstacle for me. Like, I can let that go. You know, I can pull this out of the board, you know, and I can still play this game. And if anything, you have more organic relationships from the balls having a chance to clash with each other and organically divide and scatter to the respected region they fall.
Exactly, because there's no confinement. You know, it's like a fenced-in animal. You know, you give it a pen that's 100 by 100 feet, meters, inches, whatever you want to use. Inches is a pretty bad example. It's kind of cruel.
Yeah, don't use inches.
PETA might be onto us here pretty soon if we're using inches. So feet, meters, whatever. American, Canadian, you decide. You know what you are. You know what system you use. You know, it's like an animal, right? You give it a confined pen, it'll only go within those ranges. And then, you know, you take that pen away and it will start to explore. It'll start to expand past those limitations. And that's, I feel as though where you were going with that that reference to the metaphor is
like,
you're removing fence posts. So you're opening up new avenues for a collective to form rather than this divide that we're seeing.
Yes.
Wow, we really did beat that analogy to death.
Oh yeah, we did. We need to move on.
Circling way back here, because you mentioned that you wanted to go back to like the beginning, and then we went into that big long.
I don't even know
tangent
how,
there.
But I'm not surprised.
It happened. We knew this would happen. We predicted this. Yeah. So I'll ask where you want to leave off now that we know my kind of travel experience, a little bit more about my life, and you know a little bit of perspective that I hold on a variety of things.
I would say just give a general sense of what directed you in your working career experience to know when the right time was to move forward from each job. So I would say like what you have here, you started with babysitting. Would you, and you know, this could be true, this could be not true. Like, I don't know if you started with babysitting. I would love to hear what really sparked your interest to get started with work. Was it a necessity? Was it out of curiosity? I know a lot of the times for me it was because I wanted to buy things. Like it was a little materialistic at first. As a young kid, like there's a bunch of toys you want to play with, man, and if you don't have the money, you got to work for it. And so some people learn that young, some people don't.
Well, yeah. So Technically, babysitting was not my first job. When I was, I think it was 9 years old. Tried my hand at a paper route. I did that for a few months. I got some money to my name. Blew it all at the candy store over the following weeks to look gangster in front of all the other 9-year-olds at the schoolyard. So usually necessity was the thing. Like I said, I was neglected because youngest siblings get given the world because they're the youngest. You got to spoil them because you're tired of parenting. And first siblings get first dibs on everything because they're the first. So I was just shafted on both ends. So financial need was honestly the biggest thing because like a lot of entertainment is finance based. There's especially in today's society, and then when I was a kid, I acknowledged that we were moving towards a society where entertainment wasn't as free anymore. There were very few things that you can just go out and experience. And as you grow up, the basic things that you experience, like nature and climbing a tree for the first time, those things lose their shininess. They lose their luster, because you've done them. You have that experience. You know what it feels like. You know what the negative outcomes are, what the positive outcomes are, and you've experienced it start to finish. Because of that, you don't look at those basic activities the same anymore. You look for more advanced things. So my need for working has always stemmed from the fact that from a young age, I clearly acknowledged at some subconscious level that I had ADHD and that I needed stimulus. So I was just trying to facilitate an environment where I had the stimulus I needed. And because of my autism, I didn't want to feel like I was negatively impacting anyone else. And I felt like if I asked for anything from anyone, then I was asking for a lot, and I was being a burden and a nuisance, to the point where I would go to friends' houses and they'd like offer me a drink. They'd be like, "Yo, do you want a soda? Do you want a can of Dr. Pepper or something?" I'd be like, "Oh, no, I don't want to impose." They're like, "I'm offering it to you." I'm like, no, I don't really want it. To the point, I would make an excuse. They'd be like, "No, you can definitely have a Dr. Pepper. It's not a big deal. We have a bunch." I was like, "No, it's okay. I don't even like Dr. Pepper. I fucking love Dr. Pepper." But like I would just go out of my way to not feel like I was imposing on people. Like I just didn't want to put people out on my behalf. And so from a very, very young age, I was like, okay, money makes the world go round. I need money. And so I got in Ontario, where I grew up, work experience is a must. You go into your first job 13, 14 years old as a student worker, and you will not get a job interview unless you already have a resume of like, I was babysitting, I did a paper route, I ran a lemonade stand. Like you need to have a side hustle by the time you're 13 in Ontario. Otherwise, you're probably not getting hired. It's wild.
Yeesh. So way different dynamic than America, honestly. Like,
like pretty intense job market where I grew up. So that also was a huge motivating factor of like get in early and start doing something impactful. Babysitting shows responsibility. You're responsible for another human life, maybe responsible for a young child. You're cooking, you're cleaning, you're entertaining. You're showcasing a variety of skills. Maybe you're not good at all of them, but you have a foundation. So you can start somewhere. So that was kind of how I got into babysitting. Like I said, I had a paper route before that because I just wanted to be a gangster 9-year-old. I'm the only one with $20 in my pocket, unless daddy's rich. And then, I mean, I didn't do like the next thing on the list there is, fry cook assistant and then like commercial cleaning aide for the pool hall. I was mostly there playing pool. if we're being serious. I played a lot of pool, 13 to 17. I was playing like junior tournaments and stuff. I love math. Pool was right up my alley. That was a game that just kind of spoke to me. So that was an easy transition to like working and helping out there when I was already there all the time to play billiards anyways. But for having good sportsmanship. I was a 12-year-old playing against men in this particular tournament because there wasn't juniors. And I got my ass kicked pretty much every single game. But I shook everyone's hand at the end. I said, good game. Thank you for the matches. And it was recognized at the end of the tournament. They're like, for most sportsmanlike conduct, they would like to recognize, your boy, AquaticCactus here. And I got a $400 cue from a cue maker called Nick Varner, who's a former world champion. And along with that cue, the organizer of the league pulled me to the side at the end and said, because of your interest in billiards, because of your interest and your courteousness and your sportsmanship, we would really like to introduce you to a professional pool coach that we're in touch with. And I was like, okay, cool. That's really interesting. They just didn't really explain to me the prestige of this man. His name is Harold Green. And I might not get the spelling right here. If I can do a quick, I can't, I'm not going to be able to find it because there's more important Harold Greens out there, specifically a military major Harold Green. But regardless, Harold Green was a former Canadian pool coach and contender for the world champion title. So he's a pretty talented gentleman. He's coached 7 different Canadian champions, including 2 world champions. So I got a 4-hour lesson with this guy. It was valued at $1,200, and they just gave it to me as long as I would drive 3 hours to meet him. And even within the first 10 minutes of meeting the man, he imparted a lot of wisdom on me. And one of the biggest things that stuck to me was, this is just a weird fact. Humans process excitement and nervousness the exact same way. You can't tell the difference between those two emotionally.
Which is honestly something that blew my mind when I had first heard this from you.
Yeah, and when I doubted it at first. I'm a fairly skeptical person. I like logical, well thought out thinking. But I've thought about it a great deal since then. I was 13 years old when I got this lesson, 14 years old maybe. It's been, 10 plus years. I've thought about it a lot since then, and it's very true. Because it's just negative and positive anticipation. You are either predicting a negative outcome, so you feel nervous, or you're predicting a positive outcome, so you feel excited. But you're still processing anticipation. It's just whether it makes you feel positive or negative. But it makes you, you get giddy, you get fidgety, you get nervous, you get sleepless. You want to get it, you want it to happen. It's right there in front of you, but you just can't quite reach it. You just want to lunge at it, grab it.
Take initiative.
Yeah. But it's
even if it's defensive.
Just out of reach. Exactly. You can't quite get there. That's anticipation. Do you need to go into fight or flight mode? Do you need to start thinking logically? Do you need to start rationing food survival sources? Like all these crazy things, but it all stems down to anticipation. And that concept really, many times in my life, has helped me to just stop and go, oh, I'm just nervous. I'm attaching, and then this is the big thing. I'm attaching negative emotion to a future event. I have no control over that event, and I know that now. Or, whatever limited control I have, I can operate within those parameters, those finite little boxes. That's my lane. I have to stay in it. But that is important, I think, for anyone. Is you have to have those moments of redemption, those moments where the struggle feels like it was worth it. And knowing when I'm overcoming nervousness, it helps in just acknowledging that that's a part of the struggle, and in helping to overcome anticipation and restlessness and anxiety, which is the negative part of a future event. Is it can be very anxiety inducing, which has a slew of other health issues associated with it.
Definitely.
But and deep concepts like this all boil down to nervousness and excited are the same.
And personal pressures you place on yourself, like you said, like anxieties and stress. Like some of it's external, of course, but if you choose to hold on to it, like it definitely will affect, quote unquote, your gameplay at life.
Yeah, exactly. It's like taking poison damage, but then like you have to get cured of the poison damage in order to heal to maximum health. So, as soon as you take this poison damage, you take one tick. Oh, that's not that bad of a deal. Like fallout radiation is a good example. You take one rad damage. That's not that bad. You take 5 rad damage. That's really not that bad. Take 25 rad damage. Ooh, that's starting to make an impact. Now a significant chunk of your health is missing just because it kept taking away, all because you didn't acknowledge the small damage you were taking over time. What seemed like an insignificant moment, but you just ignored it, or you were overcome by it even. I feel like it can happen as well.
Yeah, it can definitely be circumstances, and it can be ignorance. Ignorance blinds a lot of people to their own problems. Like, oh no, I'm not gonna have health issues. Oh, that's not gonna happen to me. Oh, I don't get in accidents. Like that kind of stuff is.
I don't get in accidents.
Yeah, and this stuff, I love it. Exactly. Like you don't plan accidents. That's the whole root of the word. Like
I just woke up and planned to accidentally chop my finger off today.
Oh, of course.
This was a silly thing I thought of doing.
But one thing about this, and again, like I have the advantage of staring at this list, and I've been looking at it, and we've talked about this before, and I'll let you get into the details if that's something you want to do. But I do think it's interesting how you met such an influential person to your life before one of the most influential events.
Just out of curiosity, what do you define as the most influential event there?
Well, like a variable, I should say, like at 17 when you experienced that accident. Like I know that had to have had an effect almost as influential as meeting someone such as him. Like it was a dynamic of your life that you learned something from, and that's why I mention it, because with the positivity comes the negatives, right?
Oh yeah, I just chuckle because I figured that's what you meant, but maybe you had a different perspective on it. But
the gas station attendant is pretty bad too.
Yeah, I mean, there was that horrible time as a gas station attendant, with the one highlight where I got hit by a car and got out of it for a week. That was great. It was like a little break, mini vacation. that pivotal moment in my life where I was a gas station attendant. No. Yeah. Truly, I had a very, very positive, influential moment, and that was a strong role model in my life that I could take away from a very short interaction. And then another very positive role model I have was my grandfather, who was a very successful businessman, a very successful company man when he was working within a company, a very successful family man, and just someone that you want to be like. He walks into a room and he commands an audience, and he does it without speaking. So he carries himself in a way where he truly has a presence. And other than Harold, I do have that other positive influence in my life. I'm sure Harold is probably passed now. He was 83 years old when I had the lesson with him. It was very interesting having that lesson, and then being hit by the car shortly after. Then obviously, within that same time frame, the 15 to 16 years old, another very shaping moment and pivotal moment for myself was my friend Elizabeth taking her own life. That it was the emotional stress of that, and then being hit by the car was actually why I dropped out of high school. Those two things paired together, I was not in an emotional state to do something as tedious as school. Because when I was in school, I never applied myself. It was hard for me to stay focused. Now I know that was because of ADHD, but I was an exceptional student. I tested very well. I absorbed the information. I just had no desire to participate or engage or show that I knew the information. So the school system let me down in that regard. And so when I started to struggle mentally, it figured school was the easiest thing to cut out of my life. But that moment was actually before I ever wanted to be a cook, before I ever wanted to do anything. I was going to spend 8 years in post-secondary school becoming a doctor, specifically a clinical psychiatrist, backing in developmental psychiatry, which would mean diseases of the mind, but focusing on children. So bipolar disorder, ADHD, ADD, early onset schizophrenia, things like that. And specifically in children, because I wanted to help people like Elizabeth. I wanted people to have an outlet that they felt like it was an acceptable avenue to use in a mental health crisis. And nowadays, the resources we have are light years ahead of what they were, 14, 15 years ago, 13, 14 years ago, whichever it was.
Really has a lot to say about the school system. Like, there's been so much that's changed with the involvement of social media, and that is one positive I will give social media, is it has acknowledged a lot of the development issues in society.
Yeah, awareness truly has blossomed through the school system, through social media, because more kids see it now, and and more parents see it, more teachers can understand it, and having, as we said before, having that collective knowledge, having that collective experience is a much better resource than your own divided Plinko board. You get a better involvement from a community standpoint.
Yes. And it's really like something that divides the younger generation from the older generation, because the older generation probably feels upset that they didn't have that chance.
Oh, dude, I feel super slighted. I feel like I definitely would have finished high school early if I had been given the tools that I would have needed to succeed in the way that I was. But like, there's no way to help someone like me develop socially. Like my elementary school wanted me to skip grade 6. My high school wanted me to skip grade 9 and 10. So if I had skipped all of those, I would have been 10 years old going into grade 11. That is a
Yeesh.
social nightmare.
Yes.
Like that is a social catastrophe. It's not that I wouldn't have been able to do the course load. It's that I'm not developed emotionally and mentally for 17-year-olds, for 16-year-olds. Like the age gap there, it doesn't make sense. You've got people who should be, like you're 13 in grade 11. It doesn't fucking make sense. Sorry, I did my math wrong there. I think I said 10 earlier, but no, it's 13 in grade 11. 16 and 17-year-olds. It doesn't make sense. Be 10 in grade going into grade 9, which would be awkward as hell. Like the school system sees my level of intellect and says, okay, we should push him forward. This material doesn't challenge him. But then socially, I'm 3 years behind. Like I have mental disorders that are stopping me from formulating thoughts. Not actually, that's not true. That are stopping me from formulating words that make sense to my peers. And people wondered why I gravitated towards conversation with adults for most of my young life. Is because they had the level of comprehension to fill in the gaps of what I knew I was trying to say, but didn't have the verbiage or the mentality to be able to put into one nice package.
Yes. And that's a problem with a lot of the dynamics with learning is it goes back to what we were talking about. You can never really know what a person is going through unless you've been in the circumstances that they've been through, and still you would never know if that's truly how they felt.
Yeah, exactly. Like you could, put yourself in their shoes and you can walk a mile in their shoes and then you still have no idea if you experience the same pain. You very much believe that. But yeah, so that was a little bit of stuff before the car accident and like my mentality and stuff. The car accident was definitely a shifting point in my life. Any social advancements I made up until that point, between Liz taking her life and the car accident, it was gone. I was pretty much back to square one. I was introverted as all hell. I was depressed. I was riddled with anxiety because my sleep schedule was to even put the word schedule in there is an insult. It was just the perfect concoction of mental health issues and borderline mental health crisis. I'm gonna be honest. I thought about taking my own life several times. I won't lie and say that I didn't think about it, but I don't care how it sounds. I'll just say it. I knew how angry I was at Liz, which is a selfish response. Because I was only focusing on what was taken from me and not what would have led someone to do that in the time, to feel like they had absolutely no way out. Sorry, it's just a little bit difficult for me to talk about this.
Take your time. Take your time.
Like I knew how mad I was that was the choice she made. I knew how much pain it caused me. And it's easy to think when you're depressed like that, when you're at that level, that there's no one who will react that way, who will be affected that deeply. But I told myself that if even one person that I had ever interacted with felt that way, if I took my own life, that I couldn't do that to other people.
So in a really roundabout way, it taught you the value of life.
In a very hard, upfront kind of way, yeah.
Which I don't mean any disrespect, but it is something you had to overcome. Absolutely.
Oh, and yeah, I don't take it disrespectfully. I appreciate that. It's just it taught me a certain level of. So here's why this is going to sound weird. Earlier I mentioned not wanting to feel like a burden on people. Well, on the one side of that token, okay, if I take my own life, I'm no longer a burden to anyone. And I've since used that justification and other justifications to help me deal with Liz choosing what she chose. But using that justification is a double-sided sword, because it can be the solution and it can be the root of the problem. You know, on one hand, fuck, this is really hard. This is just hard to kind of have a clear thought on.
If I may help you, like
Yeah,
with
yeah,
what I'm
please.
trying to understand is it's not a mentality you're happy to acknowledge could be the case, but in reality it's the case for a lot of people who do make that choice because they do feel a weight from society that I can't say that they feel, but from our understanding, our limited understanding of these situations, it is like a relief in an individual's eyes to excuse themselves from society, and that's it's a very 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 hard thing philosophically to even explain. There is no perfect explanation, is the truth. It's a very tough thing and ugly thing, but
Yeah, and I feel like yeah, you help me get back on track here. You know, it's the root issue is you go through a situation like that, and I feel like it either forces you to develop a deep level of empathy for others and yourself, or you kind of recede away from it, and you get to a point where you almost recoil from any warmth from someone else because you're afraid of what could be taken again. But you like, you know, you just, all of these negative emotions that I felt around it, the turmoil that I felt around it, of this is how I felt. I can't imagine how she felt. Like, I can't. So I can only act on what I know, and what I know is the immense amount of pain that it caused me, and how if I can if I can overcome that instead of doing the same thing to again, even one other person, to keep that cycle going where, you know, someone has to hurt, then that was worth putting one step in front of the other. And it took an incredibly difficult lesson to teach me to keep going.
And I have tried to carry that same lesson through losing family members and friends. Most from natural causes, but it's still taught me to a degree that throwing myself in a bush to freeze to death or putting a gun to my head, things that I both have thought before, is not and it's not the way I want to be, because I care too much to put anyone through even if I have to experience pain. It's still like I'll try my best to live my life because
Yeah,
of
you know,
the things I learned from those people, because they taught me what true happiness is, and that's friendship.
yeah. Yeah, it's the experiences you have along the way. It's the people you meet. It's it's what you do.
It's love, man.
Um,
It's truly love.
but that's exactly it. It's learning that there's pain and loss, and to just create loss for I'm not going to say for no reason. That's very diminutive. For reasons unfathomable, we'll say. You choose to make that choice for whatever reason. You are creating a burden for someone else. Someone, like, even if your goal was to not be a burden, chances are there's a very, very, very high statistical chance someone else is going to feel an immense amount of pain. Someone else may suffer psychological trauma because of it. Someone will have to deal with the mess, will have to pick you back up. Like, there's negative repercussions no matter what. So even if we feel like it's the easiest option in the moment and we'll be doing everyone a favor, it's like the favor you would be doing them is not, it doesn't make any sense, because it doesn't outweigh the value you could have brought them with your life.
Yes.
In my opinion, in my perspective, of course, I'll add that caveat.
This is a very opinionated topic. I don't think there's a fact in it. To be honest, like
I couldn't tell you a fact if I tried.
I couldn't either. I could never. I mean, again, like, I have never had a direct friend or individual I knew do this, but I have had community members talk about their experience with someone in our hometown that ended up passing through the similar situation, and
Their own means, yeah.
it was not easy, and it's still something I know for a fact these people struggle with. It is truly the human condition to want to place value on another person because you want to see value in yourself. And that's where, like, I see where you get the anger from a situation like this. And Stoicism has taught me that those things are absolutely a part of life. Those feelings of deep emotion that may not necessarily lead you down a positive route in that way, in that moment, are acceptable. They are a part of life. It's almost trial by fire mentally to understand the trauma, to understand the harsh nature of what you are processing mentally, that not everyone around you will understand.
Or maybe, or even further still, that very few people will understand.
Yes, very few. Truly.
The Japanese have a saying: you have three faces that you wear, three masks, or three faces. We'll say masks is a bad example. You have three faces. You have your everyday face. This is the face you show the world. It's very guarded. Very few people see your inner emotions. You have your friends and family face. You know, this is a more intimate network, a closer network. They see more of who you truly are. And then you have your reflection, the face you see in the mirror. And it is the self that only you know to yourself. That's the self that only you know, your intrusive thoughts that you're like, oh, well, that's weird. Only you know why you dismissed that thing that might have been a big deal to other people, but you were able to move on for. Like, only you can truly see your emotional temperament in each moment. And that concept really resonates with me, that we are really the only one who will ever see our true selves. And it's a very profound concept to think about, but also kind of humbling when you understand you're not meant to understand everything about every other person. You're not meant to know their struggles, to be able to understand it completely. That's not how we're designed. You're just meant to be able to share in the human experience, in the fact that there was struggle, that there was strife, that there was gratitude, that there was an overcoming of an obstacle, and a sense of achievement. You know, we have similarities in those things, not necessarily the specifics that pertain to those things.
Yes. And I don't want to create a tangent out of this, but this is something like I feel like may help people mentally, and you included, like, understand something, a lesson, a understanding of humanity from this. And I'm not wording it right, I'll be honest, but I just recently studied about the peasant revolt in Britain, and there was 100,000 people that rose up behind another peasant to dismantle serfhood. They were upset. They didn't feel like their lives mattered, and they felt dead. I mean, they felt like they might as well be. If, like, give me freedom, give me liberty, or give me death. You know, that saying, it goes back, like, before America was even a
Was
thought.
that 700 years? Like
That was 700.
14th century or something like that?
Yes, it was 14th century. Correct, actually. Good job.
I kind of know the history somewhat. I had a hyper fixation of history at one point.
It is grounding. It's grounding to know our roots as people. But the thing that got me about it was the friar, the pastor that was he was the start of a stone that ended up rolling, and he stood behind this, and he knew he was basically facing insurmountable odds with an untrained army. And he, when everything dismantled and fell apart, he stood his ground, and he had this idea of society that he believed could be reality one day, but he would never see it. And I think I think the reason I mention that in my mind with a lot of this stuff and these situations of deep loss, it's self-inflicted deep loss. It's almost like you feel like you made a connection with life that only you have had in that moment. And that is almost just as profound as having like it's really hard to explain these things without sounding ignorant. Like it's like understanding that there's people outside of you as part of life, but when you get blinded by the idea of your emotions not mattering, that's when you really like you fall back into your habits of, oh, like this can happen, like it will happen. And the reason I mention that is because all those people, once they lost their leader, like they dismantled, and they were backstabbed the whole way. They were sent back to serfhood, and it shows us how one individual can affect massive amounts of changes, even if it takes time. And I think that's what gets a lot of people caught up is how can I spend this much time if I'm in this much pain? And I've had that thought before where I get caught up in my head, and I don't want to keep thinking, but the reason I got there is because I didn't allow myself to breathe. I didn't allow myself to forgive myself, and I think there's a lot of people that feel that same way. They feel deep disregard to their emotional balance with other people, and they feel like there's a weight that they put on them, other people put on them, that it's too much. It's too hard to express it. And so the thing that happens is people lock up, and they never express exactly how they feel. And sometimes expression is the only way, even if it's to yourself, to work past things that don't make sense in the moment, because you're not always going to find answers, right? In
Yeah,
life and in
absolutely.
death. Like
Sometimes there's just questions.
yeah, absolutely. And that's the reason I bring it up, is because there was, how many cases in history are there people that stand up for a cause that's been forgotten? And I guarantee
Well,
they knew what they were
technically
doing.
zero. Otherwise, they'd be in history.
That's true. That is true. That is a technicality. You got me there.
It's like that is that goes in a circle.
But if I may, when I pulled it back, when I was talking about philosophy not having an answer, that's proof right there. This is a question people have asked themselves for probably the whole span of humanity. I mean, from what we know, from written knowledge, really, why people make decisions to limit life. Why do they kill people? Why do they hurt people? Why do they hurt themselves? And it's really, it sprawls down to fear of the unknown. So having these conversations it's very healthy, and I really I was gonna say this off podcast, but I think you need to hear it. Like you really should be proud of your friendship in this situation, because like it's hard to remember people and acknowledge them for who they were, not what they did. And I think that, do you have a lot of heart in what you do? And whatever lessons you pulled from what you went through with life, and I'm not saying this is the only one you pulled from, but it does show your character and how much you cared and cared to push and refine yourself into a better person that you're happy to look in the mirror at. And I guarantee it probably wasn't easy for you to look in the mirror for a long time there. I mean, I don't know how I could, if I lost a really close person. Like, I mean, it's hard enough with family and friends as is with natural causes. It's you don't choose for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a certain level of anguish and questioning, I feel like, that comes along with when people make the choice themselves, uh, with without understanding the other factors that are affecting their decision. And as I said earlier, reasons unfathomable, because
Absolutely.
only the people who see the true version of themselves will ever understand what brought them to that moment, what brought them to that choice. So only they will understand what brought them to that moment, and what brought them to that choice, and why they chose to execute that. So it's not on me to try and make choices for other people, to try and change people's minds on things. Well, not so much the other one, like to try and change people's choices is what I should try and say. You can inform people, absolutely.
But to convince them of their value if they don't see their value.
Truly. And to do so in a genuine way, I feel like it is something we should all try and do more of, even if someone doesn't see their own value. Like, something I wanted to say to you is, I just want to say congratulations for getting this podcast up off the ground, and for committing to everything and to keep going with it and to put as much effort into it as you have been. Like, just give yourself a pat on the back, man, because you're doing something that I feel like you can feel proud about, and something that you can work at and constantly improve on, and give yourself a way to challenge yourself. So you should be proud of what you're trying to do with this and with your other projects. And I know you want to take on the world, but I think the steps that you're taking right now are important.
That means a lot, honestly, man. Like, to the point of tears, honestly. This is a hard podcast, man. It's a hard podcast.
Hey, you got me in my feels. I gotta get you back.
Thank you, brother. In the one thing I have to add, because I want to close this out. I don't want to dwell on this. Is we're not psychologists. We're not therapists. We're everyday people. We're people like you and the viewer, that come here and want to experience something in their day, that they maybe haven't. And I want to keep this open in the podcast because these are real conversations. These are real conversations that don't happen regularly, and it is what Cactus said is really, really important and vital. We need to uplift people around us as much as possible, because you truly don't know how much value someone places on themselves, and one thing said, even at work, they could take that for years and carry that for years. And you have power through your actions. And I mean, I'll be honest, like, making this podcast is a very uncomfortable thing for me at the core. I know I'm sociable, but I get scared just like anyone else to express. And I don't want to be the fool, you know. I don't want to say the wrong thing, and but the thing is that it's being said, and from the reactions I've had of people telling me that they're benefiting even in a small way from this podcast has really opened my eyes up to what an individual's power is. And I want to push anyone out there who's held up on an idea to, like Cactus said, take small steps. It's a journey. It's a marathon, not a race.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're someone like me, I'll just do a quick add-on to that. If you're someone like me, I mentioned a brief bit of this in passing earlier. You have a hard time staying focused. You have a hard time, not getting overwhelmed. Sometimes when you're lost in a forest, it's not about seeing your way out. It's about seeing your next step and knowing where you can put your foot in front of you next. Because one step in any direction is a step closer than standing still.
Very well said. And I think taking the time with that analogy, I love that analogy. I love forests. Forests are a great thing, but I standing or taking a walk to observe a different environment around you, it may give you the perspective needed to save yourself.
Well, as a deep chapter of my life, even roped you into that for a little bit there. So as you obviously touched on earlier, when I was young, pretty important moments with like Harold Green, other important factors, and then went to the polar opposite there with the negative experiences in life.
And before you go on what I think you're going to go on, I just wanted to ask, like, your careers after this point, up until cooking, am I wrong in assuming that some of it was out of necessity for cash, of course, but like any of us, but was it more of like you were on a journey to try to discover your true passions in life?
Yeah, so like some of it was for cash, but not necessarily in the way that you would see traditionally, where like I just wanted to buy a bunch of things. That wasn't it. I bought myself a PS3, and then I bought myself a PS4. And like those were my big transactions. And then after my lawsuit came through and I got hit by the car, obviously I built my PC, and that's when I got into streaming, because that seemed like a big challenge for me, a way to push myself socially, find new ways to interact with people, find new people to interact with, and just really just open up a brand new social component that would force me to do what I was doing differently and start taking steps on a path that I thought was going to lead me to a better place emotionally and in terms of my social well-being. So my jobs were kind of, just for cash, but then they were a lot of, I need cash to try things now that I'm an adult and I understand myself better, to figure out what I could see myself doing, because I wanted to do something that impacted other people. And I've recently come to this conclusion where I may not be the first person to invent something. I may not be the person to do something the best. And then that might not be why I'm known. But what I can do, and what I can do very well, is challenge current systems and push things and people to the limits of their potential and their capabilities by redefining the way they do things. I'm very good at looking at a system, breaking it down to its core components, finding where there are kinks in the system, and either refining it, changing it, or workshopping it in such a way that it's just better. So I don't need to be the best at something. I can challenge everyone else to be their best. And they don't even need to be the best at something. But if I can challenge 15 other people to be the best version of themselves, they could inspire 15 other people each to be the best version of themselves. And that alone has an unbelievable potential impact. And it's really what I love about streaming is that potential is always there.
Absolutely. You honestly inspired me to do this, if you would believe it.
I appreciate that. That means a lot to me to hear that.
It's come full circle, hasn't it? And we've only known each other for like 8 months.
Jesus, this has been 8 months already? Holy.
Something like that.
What happens when I click on your profile? Can I even find out? Friends since? No? Doesn't exist? All right.
Twitch following. If you could see a Twitch following, that'd be your best bet. It's the day we met was the day I followed you.
Oh, I don't think I can go back that far unless I scrolled all the way back in my Streamlabs.
But the point is, it's been under a year, and we've gotten to this point. It's all because we've been honest with each other, and we were able to discover what commonalities we had as people.
Well, I really like that, honestly, because, like, I'll be honest, the last several months of my Twitch streaming, I overthink things. So I've had doubts. I've been like, is it even worth me streaming? I'm streaming to like 1 or 2 people. Like, am I wasting my time? I think about this shit. But it doesn't matter if I'm streaming to 1 or 2 people if I'm helping someone like, Fishy or someone, for example. I'm helping keep their mental health in a good place. Or I'm helping to inspire someone like you do something creative and to challenge your limits or what you thought were your limits. It's like those things, even though I have a smaller Twitch audience, I can still do that. I can still make that connection and make an impact. So, I don't need to have 10,000 viewers to make someone feel like they're a human being and to make them feel acknowledged. And I think like taking those years in between those traumatic events and where I am now helped develop me in a different way for each different job I took.
That makes sense. And
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna add, like, that's something that is hard to admit, right? Like, it's hard to admit that jumping and exploring is sometimes the best way to really value solidity and foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. There's value to be learned and gained or had from understanding your roots and knowing oneself. Because if you have a thorough understanding of yourself, when situations arise that may be unfamiliar, you can still count on yourself to react a certain way, to think a certain way, to do things a certain way. So if you trust yourself to do those things and to execute on your own behalf, you often will end up with a positive result. I mean, sometimes you'll let yourself down.
But being able to forgive your emotion is like, it is absolutely part of creating a strong foundation that doesn't have cracks in the seams.
Absolutely, right? Because we're emotional beings.
Absolutely.
We experience a plethora of emotions in a variety of ranges in each emotion. Because like you talk about mad, you've got he was a little upset. He's pretty miffed. He was furious. He was fuming mad. Like, you have a range. Every emotion's a range of emotion. And then it's so people learning to deal with how they handle each emotion and what their upper and lower limits are in each range is important. I feel like it's important to explore those parts of yourself in order to challenge new aspects of your self-growth.
I fully agree. I think that's a great place for us to start closing down and breaking down our closing questions. I wanted to ask you if you had any resources like media, podcast, videos that you'd recommend to anyone, possibly going through similar things with emotions, or just something that's helped you in making decisions, bettering your life.
So yeah, a couple of resources and things like that. Ironically enough, I was actually just looking through my old bookmark history the other day just to see what angsty 15-year-old me was up to on the internet. And I would love to share some of the resources, but a lot of them have since been discontinued. But a lot of it was like IARC chats and things online. Not being an incredibly social human being, a part of me getting the help I needed and taking the steps to recover that I needed. And not to say that I'm 100% recovered and don't still need a mountain of progress to be where I would like to be. To even start the healing process, though, I reached out to different avenues to see that I wasn't alone in how I felt. Like I used to just sit reading in a chat that was focused on people dealing with depression and just reading their interactions. I very rarely typed anything in the chat. But just being able to see that, what other people were feeling and how they were processing their emotions, or if they were processing their emotions during various times or versions of crisis. And that I feel like helped me have a sense of identity in my own craziness, in my own emotions and disorder. It allowed me to start to facilitate my emotions into healthier things. Turning personal emotional stresses into motivation to excel. And what I mean by that, to extrapolate a little bit, is progress is like taking sheets off of a toilet paper roll. You take one step towards your goal. It's like taking one sheet off the roll. It doesn't seem like it makes that much of an impact. But you take one more step, one more step, one more step, one more step. You keep taking that one step, that next step, no matter how small it is, you're going to get where you're going eventually. It's bound to happen. So don't focus on the fact that you're not where you want to be. Focus on the fact that you're where you need to be right now. So, you asked for resources. That's my personal advice. That's kind of the best resource I could give you. And if you really feel like there is no one in your life that you can talk to, there are crisis hotlines, and there are people on the other end of that phone who will try their very best to connect with you, to treat you like you're a human being, to make you feel like you're seen and your emotions are valid. Because it's very easy to get caught up in our own emotions and then to feel so pathetic and so stupid and so little because you even feel that way. And how could anyone feel that way? And you know, it's so easy to get caught up in that mentality. But trust me when I say that someone in your life cares. Your own emotions are stopping you from reaching out to those people. So if you need to do it anonymously, the crisis hotline exists in something like 161 different countries, an unbelievable amount of languages, and truly just respect each thing you're going through in life, because it's going to be a part of your success in the future. It's just a matter of understanding it's not tomorrow, it's not next week. You're planning 10 years, 20 years down the line. Rome wasn't built in a day, and we're all built on emotional cracks. We're not perfect human beings. So it's going to take time to fix your empire, to reestablish yourself from the ground up. But you have to give yourself that time. You have to be patient with yourself and with the people around you. And I think that's where I'll end that little diatribe.
I think that's wonderful. I truly think that's a wonderful phrasing of things. And the one thing I would add as a resource is streaming. I think there's a lot of people. I know I used to view streaming as kind of a waste of time, like a distraction ultimately, right? But you know,
Yeah.
we go over to social media or we go over to YouTube and get just as distracted. The thing is, if you give that avenue a chance, if you never have, of course, there's a lot of people nowadays that have, but if you're one of those people, maybe an older person that hasn't given it a chance, and you're really curious about how the younger generation feels about things, like I would implore you to give it a shot. I think it's a wonderful resource. It's like anything else, you have to filter through. You have to really find what you want. But again, I would have never met Aquatic here if I had never played Apex and saw how bad his teammates were. That's just the truth. We only met because of random chance, random coincidence, and completely the truth.
Yeah, I definitely like your addition there. Streaming is a great avenue. There's a lot of streams advocating for mental health, advocating their stream as a safe space for mental health discussions, for facilitating a safe space for people to just, you know, be people, to be a human and have emotions. And, you know, I feel like that's a lot of what I want to cultivate on Twitch. And I know there's a lot of other streamers out there who want to cultivate that same sense of, it's not belonging, but it is understanding. You're a human being. You've experienced a great deal of things, and that makes you unique, and it makes you a part of this crazy thing that we call life. And streaming is a great way to connect. You know, you don't have to know about the game the streamer's playing to understand that there's a human being there feeling emotions, expressing their passions, talking about something they enjoy, trying to have a conversation with someone because they want a conversation. You know, whatever their reason is for being on the camera, for being on the mic, you know, that there's a dozen other people out there who want exactly that. And you just got to find your little community, your space, or your big community, your space that you feel like you're recognized in. And you, even if you're a part of the masses, you're still recognized as an individual that makes up that mass. And streaming is a wonderful, wonderful avenue, as Camo said, for connecting the older generation to the younger generation. It's a great gateway. There's tons of young people streaming, so they're using all the latest lingo and jargon. So if you're trying to stay hip and cool, talk to your grandkids over the internet, you can. I recently had my grandfather ask for my Twitch link, and that was kind of an interesting concept. I think I'm going to have to walk him through setting up a Twitch account and like how he will go about watching me or checking out my VODs and stuff like that. But he made a funny joke, or like it might have not even been a joke. He's like, hey, maybe you'll make a gamer out of me yet. So there's a level of connection that him and I could share, even though we're a country apart from each other. And we could still have a level of connection and share something that we normally wouldn't have been able to even 5-10 years ago without that. We could facilitate a bond through streaming where he watches me play a game, learns how to play through watching me, and then he can play the game right alongside me without that weird gap of, oh, I've got to teach you everything about the game and why it's cool and why it's fun, and this is why I have fun.
And
it's
the
like, have you ever
community
tried
it brings.
Yeah, like have you ever tried to teach someone how to have fun in a game? It's not possible. Like, people find their own fun and their own amusement. Where I find, ranked grinding and leaderboard stats to be my fun in a first person shooter. Someone might like not picking up a gun every game and just going to see how many times they can punch someone. And that's their fun. And streaming opens up the doorway for you to find fun or a hobby or an interest in so many different ways in the gift basket of an interaction with a real human being, someone you can ask questions to, someone you can maybe join in with and be a part of whatever it is they're doing if you like it, and have a direct one-on-one experience. You can get that interpersonal, hands-on type of interaction. And I feel like that's something that the mental health resources I could give otherwise are lacking in a way that streaming is not. You build a connection with someone at your own pace, with your own tools and resources, and from the comfort of your own home. So it's kind of the best scenario of how to, experience something new, or experience something you already like, or just meet up with like-minded people, because there's tons of different sub-communities within the streaming community.
Yes, it's entirely correct. And that's the biggest thing is understanding it's not just you trying to express and possibly failing to express. There's plenty of streamers who doubt their work, and there's plenty of content creators. I mean, anyone who produces an art of some form has to acknowledge that maybe it's not going to be interpreted the way that they would appreciate. But being content with the people you do reach out to, and the people that do stick around, there's no less value to those connections than in person. I truly believe, and this side of society is a part of life now. Streaming is a part of life. It is a way of life for some people, and to truly understand what others are experiencing. It's opening your perspective to the various arts, the various forms of expression, and this is one. And then I couldn't help but mention it because of how profound my interactions have been with people through streaming, and even just fellow audience members. Like there's no reason you can't take that opportunity to make friends, and sometimes that's what we all need, is to make a friend.
Yeah, exactly. You're there with like-minded people, right? Like I say, it's a mini community or a large community there with like-minded people. So maybe you don't connect with the streamer, but the streamer's got 25 people that you connect with in the chat, or one person you connect with in the chat. Doesn't matter. You just met someone that now you can connect with. So you take that friendship off of the stream to a Discord. That person can still support the stream. That's totally fine. Have your likes, have your interests. But you can also form a connection outside of that now.
Absolutely. I think that's honestly a wonderful place to wrap this, because this is by far the longest podcast so far.
I warned you that it might be that way.
I expected it, man. My body expected it apparently when I passed out mid playing games.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, you need to be well rested. So
oh yeah,
3-hour Cactus podcast coming up.
Hey, it's truly been an honor talking with you, man. And like I said, I look up to you, man. And I know that it's got to be hard to feel slow in your progress with viewership. I totally understand that. Music is one thing personally I've always struggled getting out there. So I understand from an emotional aspect, like the connection you have with your audience matters to you. And I just really hope that you find ways to expand it in a healthy way, in a pace that benefits your mind, because you deserve some peace, you deserve some respect, and I think that you should really feel proud of the person you are, and your efforts to help troubled youth.
Well, thank you, sir. I really appreciate your words today. And again, if we ever wanted to do another episode, I'd be happy to. I feel like there's still tons we could have a chat about. We could deep dive into numerous other things.
Oh, and we've got projects together
and that's exactly it. And I look forward to doing the Knights at the Round Table podcast with you. That'll be. Do we have like an official name for that, or is that just what we're calling the group of casters?
that is the code name for the podcast at the moment. But
code name pod. Okay.
Yeah, as we expand our conversation about it, we will decide what we will name this beast of a podcast that we're developing, because it's going to be fun, man.
Yeah, the little teaser for a behind the scenes project in the future there. So there'll definitely be more Camo Cactus shenanigans.
Absolutely.
It was an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. I did figure we were probably going to be here for about 3 hours.
Yeah, you're better than I am.
Hey, I know how much I like to talk once I'm in that mood. It takes a little bit for people to get to know me and me to get there, but once I'm there, I feel like I can chat for a while, and I like to go on tangents, chat about random things, and ADHD.
ADHD, that's what I'm going to name this podcast.
Dude, that'll sum it up. It's like, wait, why are we talking about turtles all of a sudden?
It's almost every one of my podcasts, so it's bad, man. I hop around a lot too.
It's all good. It's all good. You gotta keep people interested, bounce between topics. I feel like we tied everything together fairly nicely. There wasn't too many loose ends.
Man, now
only like one major train derail. Yeah. Now people have a much better understanding of Plinko, and then have probably lost all relevant application of that analogy.
Man, life's a journey, and I'm very appreciative that if you made it this far, that you were here with us, and I'm sure Cactus feels the same way. It's truly been a great conversation.
Absolutely. And if you made it this far, all I can say is go win some money on Plinko now.
Yeah, your odds are good. We're giving you the Plinko luck, all right?
Free Plinko luck for anyone who made it this far.
Well, thank you everyone, and this has been the World Networking Podcast. We'll be back in 2 weeks, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us today on this podcast. I love talking to Aquatic. He's had a diverse amount of experience that really makes him into a great individual to bounce ideas off of in a lightful way and an educational way. And I really commend him for standing up and talking about these subjects with you, the viewer, and with me, the host. I don't view these relationships lightly, and I really value what I learned from this recording today. I implore you, please, to reach out in times of trouble. Give people that trust to be there to help when you need that helping hand. There's no shame in understanding life from another person's perspective and asking for that perspective when you really need it the most. So please, refer to the detailed list below for links to Hotlines and to links to Cactus's channel on both Twitch and Kick. He is more than happy to share his experiences through his stream, and I am sure he would love to meet you one-on-one as well. So thank you so much, and again, this has been the World Networking Podcast.